Just stop it. The run-of-the-mill, cheesy, humdrum bullshit status quo just tires me out. What fascinates me are the industry disruptors, the superhuman frontiersmen or women who go through hell to achieve their goals. Join me as we meet and learn from those mavericks, rebels, and business leaders that aren't afraid to piss off the establishment in order to make radical change for good. Sponsored by Johto PR, the disruptive anti-PR firm that murders your competition with cinder blocks and cyanide. This is Disruption Interruption. Welcome back, everybody, to Disruption Interruption. I'm your host, KJ, and we're here today to talk to another industry leader that has steered off the lame, tired path of the status quo. Today's guest has been disrupting for over 2 decades. He's a technology veteran in sales and marketing. Ooh. And we're talking to him today to discuss the present challenge. What is it? How to buy or how to sell in today's market. He's an out-of-the-box thinker, and he knows how to deliver results in a chaotic market. So here we are, Era of Disruption, coming to us live from Highland Park, Illinois. Please welcome our disruptor, Regional Sales Manager at Redpoint Global, Inc., Josh Bilow.
Bilow, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm glad that you referenced the buy low in selling.
I had to.
I just have to, before we jump in, I just have to say any of my references to anything are not part of my organization, Redpoint.
I know.
So I'm with Redpoint. I have to have the disclaimer out there that these are my own thoughts and judgments, and anything we talk about is from me.
Fantastic. Okay, totally got it. I just have to point out the irony, and I love the ironies in life, but you are in sales and your last name is Bilow. But you know, that's the irony because nothing is as it seems, right?
I think that's a challenge because everyone wants a discount.
But we're not in the age of discounts anymore. Like, that's for commodities. We're in disruption. So before we get into this, right? So we have challenges today, right? But what is your main ingredient? Your main, common denominator ingredient for disruptive innovation?
I really believe it's curiosity and impactfulness, those two things, right? Because curiosity is how they're going to accomplish something. What's the outcome? The impactfulness goes above and beyond selling something to somebody, right? It's being impactful in an organization, impacting people's lives, which has been my main goal all along. It just took me about 27 years to get there, right? I had to have a couple of gray hairs, a gray beard, but it's truly that impactfulness and that curiosity about what companies are doing. And then you can leverage yourself as a trusted advisor, which is an overused term, by the way. I apologize for using it, but it makes sense in the context that we're talking.
Yes, I agree. It is a hackneyed expression, isn't it?
Yeah.
But curiosity, I've heard that from a couple of disruptors, and impactfulness. Now that I really like. And, impactfulness in what? In terms of outcomes? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I when I became 50, I kind of changed my whole thought process, and I realized my goal was to be impactful. Okay, what that means, if I can change somebody's life at a company, I can coach them through a process. I can have an outcome that they desire. I can help them through something. But it's personally and professionally. It's both. I think if you connect just on a level of, hey, you want to buy my stuff, right? You have to be able to impact that person and get them motivated and coach them to do something, whoever you're talking to. That's the impactfulness.
Got it. That makes sense. Well, we have a lot of things going on today, right? I mean, we've got the metaverse, we've got so many disruptive technologies coming out, right? This is people, the buying cycles changed, people are more educated. Let's talk about the status quo for a bit, right? Let's paint that picture before we get into what's changing or what's needed to change. Let's look at the status quo that really has been disrupting sales and marketing and the buying cycle? What would you say?
Well, I don't think status quo is okay anymore. I think status quo, if you're status quo, you're going to fail. I've seen big companies fail miserably with status quo, right? And the larger you are as an organization, the harder it is to unstatus quo yourself.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So what do you think, how would you describe the status quo today that needs to change, that people are going to fail? I mean, this is a real issue. We have a lot of big companies that listen to this podcast. They are afraid of disruptors. They want to know what do we need to do?
Yeah, the status quo is basically you can't keep on doing stuff that you're doing today. I mean, it's not working. You know, you talked about a lot of things. You threw out metaverse, you threw out Web 3.0 and all that kind of stuff. We're not even there yet, right? Everyone's getting excited about that. We're 5 years away from metaverse, right? The status quo is okay. It's okay what we've been doing it. We've been doing this for 5-10 years. We've been selling stuff, right? We're doing stuff, expecting the same outcome today as we did then, right? And the status quo is just keep on doing what you're doing, right? And so I think today many companies are so big that they've gotten these silos, bureaucracies, and everything else, that it's difficult for them to unwind that status quo. They're trying, but it's so difficult to say, how do we do something different?
Yeah, what do you think needs to be done differently? Because COVID's just accelerated this. I mean, this has been changing. The buying cycle's been changing, but COVID just went, and then we're in this, oh, shoot moment, right? What's the biggest thing that needs changing?
Look, I don't think it's just COVID. I think it's inflation. I don't know if I can say that word on your show. I mean, is that okay? Can we talk about it?
Yeah.
Can we talk about inflation?
Yeah.
Can we talk about all the shit that's going on in the marketplace today, right?
Yes, let's talk about it.
Look, big companies weren't prepared for any of this.
No.
And I actually, so I'll tell you an interesting story. I was at the health club today. I was in the sauna early in the morning, like 5-6 o'clock. I was talking to an accountant and I said, why aren't these big companies planning for disasters? Well, plan for disaster recovery and technology, but why aren't you planning for a pandemic? Why aren't you planning for this, right? Because the odds that it'll happen were slim to none, but look what happened. So it accelerated their need for digital, their need to do things more effectively with data, their need to just do things effectively as a team, as opposed to these silos and organizations. That's not happening yet, though. It's still a process that companies are trying to figure out.
Why do you think it's not happening? I mean, we've had a pandemic. It's been 2 years. I mean, that is a big, I see SMBs pivoting very fast, and they have the technology to pivot fast, right? But we have a lot of large corporations that employ a lot of people. This is a big shakeup, and sales is pivotal, right? Why do you think they're not changing fast enough?
You actually said it right? The SMBs know what they're doing. They're able to pivot quickly. Within chaos comes opportunity. That old saying, right? But the people that are able to take advantage of opportunity are SMBs, right? Mid-sized companies. They can change on a dime, and they have a team of people that say, okay, let's do this. Let's try this. A Fortune 500 company has a lot of culture involved, a lot of processes involved. So how do you unwind those processes that fast? You can't. So what companies were doing during COVID is they were thinking, oh my God, people aren't going into the stores anymore. They're not buying stuff in our stores. We got to go digital, right? So how can we buy product? How can we buy technology as fast as possible? Technology is not going to solve that problem for those companies. It's the change in the people and the culture that's going to solve that problem. Technology without people is just technology. People used to buy that 20 years ago. They used to just buy technology, put it on the shelf, right? Today, there has to be an outcome involved. right? There has to be a process involved. So all these companies are changing their buying processes to say, well, what's important? What is it going to contribute to our bottom line, top line? They're looking at it, but there's the challenge because they're not nimble anymore. They can't buy quickly. They can't make decisions quickly. That's the challenge.
Wow. They can't buy quickly. They can't buy quickly. They can't make decisions quickly. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, if you look at large companies are starting to implement these buying processes of now we don't want to be burnt. We want to have an MVP. We want to pilot your software. We want to make sure it works in our environment. Mm-hmm. Right? We want to make sure it's going to do what it's supposed to do. Right?
That's changed the whole selling game, hasn't it?
It's changed the whole selling game. It's changed the whole compensation game for salespeople. It's changed everything. Because if you think about it, a pilot or an MVP can go on for 3 to 6 months. And it might be a fraction of the dollars that a company might want to bring in. So not only has it changed that, it's changed how companies forecast revenue that are software companies, because now it's a different world. You can't just sell a product anymore in 3 years down the, 3-year commitments, subscription service, great. It's now, we're going to try this for 6 months.
Well, that's even changed the whole engineering cycle too, right? Because there's a whole implementation. So for a large enterprise contract, right?
Yeah.
And now you have this pilot. This is very interesting. So you got this pilot. I'm going to pilot this for 6 months.
Yep.
That is an engineering ramp up. That's got to be super quick, super fast. It's almost like technology in a box, right? I'd like this option, I'd like this option, this option, and then boom, yeah, I want to test it out. Oh, we don't like it so much. We're going to try something out. I mean, that is a whole new, that's a whole new product development. In a way.
Yeah, I think those SaaS, software as a service, has been enabled to be able to do that, right? But what you have to do is put guardrails on it. You have to say, look, don't start going out there and wanting to solve the world's problems. You see, when you buy software, typically you're trying to solve a huge problem at your organization if it's an enterprise software, right? And with an MVP approach, right, you're trying to solve one problem just to prove that the solution works, right? And so that MVP approach is, all right, let's put guardrails on it. But unless you got to be, if without those guardrails on that MVP approach, they get too mile wide and mile deep, and they start adding stuff to it, and that's where they fail. And then the MVP fails, and then you spend 3 months on an MVP, and then no one has a deal. They're upset, they didn't get it, and then they go to the next technology, right? And it's a different world, because I don't think it's necessarily COVID. I think the economy has driven us to that process. COVID sped up digital transformation and usage of data, and combining in-store, digital, all that kind of stuff. COVID sped that up. COVID sped up kind of the sales process, but again, changed, right? Because you don't have to get on a plane and travel. It evened the playing field of big companies and small tech companies, because I'm not taking, someone's not taking you to the US Open, right? I worked for a very, very large software company, not to mention any names, but people used to take them to wherever they wanted to go, islands, right? And they would meet the CEO of the most famous company and all that kind of stuff, and they would buy that way. So the mid-sized software company was able to step in during COVID and go, okay, man, I'm going to show you our technology can actually do something for you. And so the game changed there too.
So very interesting. Well, the COVID thing is an economy thing, if you really think about it, right?
I agree. I agree. Yep.
All right. So that's changed the buying cycle. What's what's the solution to this? Because you have this big shakeup, and it's going to take real critical thinkers in sales to navigate this disruption, right? And innovate as they're going along. What's the solution as this happens?
Yeah, that's the key. You have to have good leaders in the space that can be those critical thinkers to help the individual contributors drive a process in this new age, right?
Yeah.
And those leaders have to have that understanding of what's going on. It's a holistic approach, right? It should have always been a holistic approach to selling, right?
Yeah, that's another hackneyed term, but you're right. It should have been another holistic approach, right?
Sorry, yeah. I don't know any way to describe it.
Holistic approach, but it's true.
No, but I think holistic approach is actually very, very relevant here because it's dealing with people that are unsure of their jobs. It's dealing with companies that are unsure of their future that you're selling to. And, they can be fired at any moment. They don't want to misstep. So if they're not believing in what you sell and you're not advising them and understanding the impact, like I said before, impact, right? You're not making an impact on them. They're not going to buy anything, right? From you.
Yeah.
They might buy some from someone else that's doing it. But I think the leaders have to change. Leaders of, sorry, I'll pause there for a second. Go ahead.
No, go.
Leaders used to be, what's the revenue coming in this quarter? What's the revenue coming in, right? Forecast. Run an Excel spreadsheet, whatever. I think that is fine, right? We have to predict revenue as much as we can. That's what leaders do, right? That's how you predict your investments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it has to be more involved in that. You have to understand what's going on with the companies in a potential territory, in a potential space. How are they reacting? How are they responding? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are they feeling right now, man? Are they afraid? Right? If they're afraid, what are you going to do? Right? So you have to have all that. I think it's more of a okay, I'm not going to go there. I was with another term.
The self-awareness thing. Right?
No. I'm not going to go there with all those terms. But it really is this approach of looking at everything, right? And asking the question, well, this is your role in a company, right? You're supposed to do this job. What happens if you don't? Right?
Yeah.
Asking those tough questions. Are you going to be fired? Are you scared? I mean, I'd be worried. You're in a huge role in your company. If this isn't successful, your job's on the line, right?
That's right.
We have to have these honest conversations with people that salespeople aren't really, I don't say all, right? There are some salespeople that are, but a lot of salespeople aren't equipped to having those conversations because they're so narrow-minded on the money. And once you're narrow-minded on the money, you end up doing stupid things.
That's a really good point. And I think that is the mic drop of this show, because we're really talking about, I think, getting back to basics in selling. I hate to say that. It's another cliche, right?
No, I talked about it. I talk about it all the time.
But this is really back to basics. I have a lot of sales books. I was thinking of something of like an old book, Sales Closing Techniques, like Les Dane, like back in the day, right? Speaking to a man, he's like 80, 85. He was back in the day when he was selling technology for, God, I can't remember the company in Boston, but they had to have those hard conversations and they had to know everything about the technology. And they even implemented it once it was sold. And then we have this change of the sales system. So you've got SDRs and you've got account execs, you've got closers and and the knowledge, you have engineers, sales engineers, they come in with the knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So you have these like silos that worked. But now what you're saying is that's not working in a certain aspect, right? And your sales reps, your sales execs, they're really having to get back to the impact, the ruin, what's going to happen if you don't do this, those hard conversations, those ice water dips, that it's not about the, feeds and speeds, but it's about the outcomes, right? The impact.
Listen, it's always been about the outcomes.
Well, yes.
Right. But the problem is not the problem. I don't think it's a problem. I think most companies had so much money to buy software and there was so much money pouring into it that no one thought about the outcomes like they do today. Right. We all talked about desired outcome. Oh, what's desired outcome? I ask companies all the time, what's your desired outcome? We don't know. We just know we need to buy this. Well, okay, that doesn't make much sense. Do me a favor, come to me in a month when you figured out your outcomes, and then we can talk. It's a challenge because, again, people are tasked with doing stuff that executives say, okay, we got to buy this shiny new toy because I understand it's doing something. And we have, if you look at all the acronyms out there, DXP, CDP, MXP, blah, 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 blah. We're acronyming people to death.
Right.
And the analysts are acronyming people to death. And no one knows what the heck they want because no one's helping them get there, right? I should say, okay, I'm generalist, right? But salespeople, if they're not knowledgeable, can be dangerous.
Yes.
You sell something to a company where somebody could potentially be fired. I mean, most salespeople sit there going, I don't care, I got paid. I don't want, that's where it comes impactfulness, right? I don't want to sell something to somebody that's going to be fired. I want to sell something to somebody that's going to be impactful to help them get their job, grow in their job, or get a better job, or whatever it may be, right? That's a different kind of person today than the old salesperson that was all about, you remember that term coin operated?
Yeah.
One of the worst terms in the world, right? Because the salespeople should never be coin operated. Yes, you should want to make money, but if your end goal is making money, you're going to fail today. In the past, I think it was possible. It was possible to make money being coin operated because people at a velocity were buying stuff. So you talked about COVID, right?
Yeah.
You talked about the economy. And so COVID and the economy go hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
And so you can't be coin operated anymore. People are afraid. This changed the dynamic of people on a daily basis they were afraid they were going to die, part of their life, right? And now they're at a company and they're afraid of the financial. Look at all the technology companies that just laid off people. Oracle just cut salespeople. Why do you cut salespeople?
I didn't know that. Why
Oracle
do you
laid off? I know why. The demand has changed.
Yeah.
The demand is, you never cut salespeople. I mean, salespeople is one of the things that, shouldn't be the first to go, even though it is. It's ironic, right? You should always.
Ironic.
Yeah. It's very ironic. And they laid off a bunch of salespeople, but companies are slowing their roll in buying technology. So we're going to continue to see this slowdown of deals that are coming in. And I don't see it changing with big companies. I'm not talking about mid-sized SMBs. I think SMBs and some of these there are critical software companies out there that are cloud management companies, infrastructure companies that do stuff with clouds and infrastructure and all that kind of stuff that are very important. I'm talking about the marketing stuff, right? The MarTech, the ad tech, the data. That's all kind of slow rolling right now.
That is fascinating. I think that's probably my favorite sound bites of this particular podcast. Companies, it's a slow roll of buying technology today. So if we were to define this disruption and this innovation needed, how would we couch it? How would we phrase it?
I got to think about this.
This is a thinking podcast today.
This is a thinking podcast because if I give you an answer off the cuff, I'm going to end up.
Because our listeners are thinking too. They're thinking this right now.
All right. So the disruption is without an outcome, don't buy stuff. Think about your outcome, right? Outcome. What's the outcome? Then think about the people that are involved in that outcome in your organization. Who's involved in producing results for that outcome? And then go find the technology. Don't go find technology first and fit people to that technology without a plan, without a desired outcome, because you'll fail.
You're absolutely right. Start with the have and work back to the do and the be. Who are the people that are wearing those roles? What are their hats? What are their, yeah. Holy moly.
Do you have the right people? Also, do you have the right people in the roles?
Right.
You might have the wrong people in the roles, right?
Can you give me an example of that scenario?
Which scenario? The wrong people in the roles?
Well, the whole thing of like looking at the outcome, then looking at the people, and then looking at the technology. You don't have to like name names or anything like that, but give me a scenario so I can really like. It's one thing to know it high level, but to really know it. Give me an analogy.
I'll give you an analogy in a large company. Large companies, there's a saying. I'm sorry, I'm using all these sayings, but I think it's important, right? I don't know. Salespeople are all about sayings, which is I try not to. I try to catch myself and joke about it, right?
Yeah.
Because I catch myself saying it, but I think it's important. It describes something. So if you think about it, like data's the new oil. Right?
Yes.
Data, first party data, new oil. First party data. So what companies have to do now is look inward at their first party data. How are we utilizing our first party data? Are we effective? Right? So this brings up marketing people that aren't equipped to understand their data. So they now have the tension of opposites where they're talking to the data people, and the data people are like, we don't want to give up the data. I don't know, And so there's this whole disruption there where they need the data to be successful, right? But the outcome is not, I got an email out the door. That's not an outcome, right? But every company sits there and says, the patient was a success, the operation was a success, but the patient didn't make it, right? An old analogy that I love to use, right? Because they got a lot of emails out, they sent a lot of emails, it was no costs, they got open rates and all that kind of stuff, but they targeted nobody through data. So that is really the challenge. So the right people in the right place, the right marketers that understand that data is important, and then the right strategy for utilizing that data to be able to do something with it. That's the outcome, right?
Yeah. What's it like when you say to prospects, okay, you don't know your outcome? You don't know your people? That come back to me when you know that.
I don't phrase it that way, but that's a good question. I give them homework. I say, look, slow down a little bit. You never, by the way, salespeople should never say slow down, right? It's important though to slow them down because you have to say, look, unless we know your outcomes and what you want to accomplish, I can't position anything. I can help you, right? How often do you walk into a doctor's office? Does the doctor ask what your outcome is?
No, they should. And one day they will, probably not in our lifetime, but.
Right.
But
similar in sales, we have to be able to understand outcomes and we have to ask them politely, right? But you can't do it unless you've earned the right to ask the question.
Ooh, good point. So how do you predict this whole shakeup in the buying process and sales is going to change the landscape in the next year, 2, 3 years?
I think the buying process is going to be slower. It's going to be more outcome driven and revenue driven, specifically tied to a project. How are we going to increase our revenue? I'm seeing it already. They're being asked, right? Is it going to grow our revenue by 10%, 5%, 20%? You know, but funny thing is like everyone that gets asked that question, they give a really low number, and then their project gets eliminated. Right?
Why? Because they're trying to be conservative, right?
Yes, and you can't, if you're too conservative in your approach, why should I buy the software if it's going to increase my revenue by 1%? Depending on what company. I mean, there are companies 1% is pretty big.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's different types of technology, right? There's not only revenue generating technology. There's also other, right? So I believe it's gonna people within Fortune 500 companies, people in general, are going to have to tie it to revenue, tie it to some kind of thing, not ROI anymore. ROI is kind of, I like to kind of put it off. I think ROI is, I shouldn't say dead.
That's actually really good. That's a really good ROI is dead headline.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm just going to get people shooting me for that. You know, they spend a lot of money on ROI. But no, but it is, because it's not about the ROI. I can get a return on investment quickly with software. Just, I have to discount my software and look at what you're looking to make the first year, and then we're done. I want to look at contributions to profit. Different.
Hell yeah, I like that. I like that. Did you ever think you would be in this position to be looking at the whole buying process and the sales process like this?
I'm in it every day. So yeah, no, I have a lot of talks like this. I talk to a lot of people. That's called impactfulness, right? You know, my goal and my journey is impactfulness. And any way I can create an impactful, be an impact on anybody, whether it's this podcast, anybody else, that's kind of my thing. Look, I don't get paid for this. You're not paying me today to come on your show, right? But it's something that I enjoy, and it's part of my holistic world to be impactful.
Yeah. Well, I like it. And I like this whole buying process and sales process. It'll have to be contributions to revenue. And it'll be very interesting to see how this shakes up. Right? These pilot
Absolutely.
6 months packages, here, we'll do this, we'll do that. It's really gonna shake up the whole development side as well.
I agree. And well, because the development side is you have to be able to develop a product that you can actually do that.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
How can I go online and test your software?
What a massive change. It's actually really cool. I know some people are freaking out, but
listen, you know what? Everybody's freaking out right now. I don't think there's anybody that's not in the technology world and business. I think everyone is concerned, afraid. They don't know. I think it's our jobs as advisors to be able to help them get through that, right? And we have to understand they're people that are buying this, right? They're not just money-making machines for us. There's a person there that's going to, you know, have to buy our technology and have to defend it.
Yeah, that really takes it out of this almost like the suppressive digital world that suppresses your identity. It puts the human factor back into it. And who'd have thought, right? Who'd have thought that would have happened?
Look, I think human factor is coming back into everything, right? And it's younger generations that are bringing it back. I think we went far enough away, you know, and this is just my own 2 cents here, you know, that we've made, you know, kids are depressed. People are depressed. This and this and this, because we've gone so far away from human interactions. We've gone to this digital world. So you talked about metaverse and 3.0, Web 3.0. That is, you know, there's a misnomer in there. because it's not being created. It's democratization of technology. So the Facebooks, the Googles don't have control anymore, right? That's the purpose.
Right. Good.
That's the purpose. And it's part of it. It's not going to replace stuff. It's going to help people. And I believe there's a huge space for it in healthcare.
I agree with you. I think there is a huge space for it in healthcare. I mean, it's already being piloted in certain things, but I think it's going to be massive.
Yeah. But that's going back to your talk about people, right? So going back kind of full circle, again, I'm full circle. I just, every nook and cranny, we could shooting fish in a barrel. I still don't even know what those things mean,
right.
But it's going back to the basics, like you said. It's going back to the fundamentals of just being a person. We forgot how to be people along the way.
Yeah, that's a very painful lesson, but it's a good lesson. It's a good lesson.
Great
to have.
Lesson.
It
Love
is.
the lesson.
Yes. Yes. So what do you do in your off time when you're not, selling, what's your crazy passion? What do you do, for impactfulness in your hobbies or outside passions or what?
We can't talk. No, I'm just kidding. No. So I'm an avid boxer, weightlifter, fitness person. But I also coach a lot of people in my off time, and I do it for free.
Do you coach in boxing, or you coach in weightlifting, or what do you coach?
No, I coach people on development.
You coach people.
I coach people. So I got into that because I realized there's a need to help people, and it's kind of like that impactfulness I talk about. I like to just help people realize it just is, and accept things and move on, right?
Yeah.
So I've been involved.
People are trying to look at everything to be perfect. They're going to be a very unhappy person.
Well, I help people through all those tough times, and executives, and people say I miss my calling and I should be coaching people, for a living. Once it becomes monetized, it changes the whole thing, right? I enjoy it. It's something I enjoy, right? But my goal, I brought up 3 kids. My whole thing, I know your producer asked me this question of, do you want to talk about your job? And I said, I don't know. My job was to bring up 3 children. One's graduated from UCLA a year and a half ahead of schedule.
That's badass.
Wisconsin, yeah, and he just got my son just got a job with a great consulting company at 20 years old.
That's fantastic,
right? I have a freshman on a tennis team in high school that's killer tennis player. So that's my job, right? That's my impact. The rest of it I just learned throughout life because I've seen pain. I've seen life stories, and I like to help other people because of those life stories.
That's beautiful. Well, life bleeds, doesn't it?
It can bleed,
Tell
me
about your foundation. You have a foundation, right?
Yeah. So I established this Lee Aaron Bilow Foundation. My brother lived 7 years with ALS. And he lived 7 years of ALS because he cared about other people, other than himself. And his philosophy was, if I thought worrying would help, I would worry a lot more, but it's not going to help, so I might as well do something special.
Wow.
So he wrote 2 children's books with his eyes because he couldn't talk.
Wow.
And he was an inspiration to a lot of people. Actually, he and I posted a lot of stuff together, inspiring people in general, where when he passed away, people were sad that they weren't going to hear our stories anymore. So I saw the hardest thing was, and can I tell you the story? I want to make sure we still have time.
Yes, tell it.
So first of all, my father is a wonderful human being. My mom just passed away in May. It's okay. My father's a wonderful human being. He spent his entire life savings providing care to my brother. A lot of care, right? Caregivers round the clock. Because when you have ALS, you have to have care.
Right.
And I was getting on a plane to go to Las Vegas to a conference. My dad calls me up on the phone, goes, I don't have much more money. I don't know how I'm going to provide care. I'm getting on the phone, starting to call people, like, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay for Lee's care, my brother? And I get to Vegas. There, the next day, my brother passed away.
Wow.
Like my own brother almost knew that we were running out of funds, that money wasn't available anymore. So the foundation, which is not doing very well, we started it right before COVID. Right.
Yeah.
I had all these high hopes. What I realized, the foundation was actually to help provide care for people that have ALS, right? But what I realized is no one wanted to do that. Like Augie's foundation has a great foundation. He's a life fitness guy out in California. Anyhow, he has a great foundation to try to solve ALS. Everyone wants to solve these problems, but no one wants to care for the people that have these problems.
Interesting. And you're right. They do want to solve it.
And that's why my foundation, I went through, by the way, I had a great law firm here in Chicago, a friend from high school who's a partner, put together all my associations. I was fortunate. He put together all the paperwork, did everything for free, right? I think I let him down, but it's tough. It's tough raising money for care for people with a specific illness like ALS. It's a hard thing to do. It was noble at the time, and I'm still trying. I'm still speaking to people and still helping people, but it's tough. It's tough.
It's a big education campaign.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Start a podcast.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to start a podcast. I have time to start a podcast right now.
Okay, good. Do it. Bam.
I'm just going to do a podcast. So let's just start a podcast. I wish it was that easy.
Josh, how do people get a hold of you, and what should they get a hold of you about? Talk about the new buying process, talk about this disruption, in contributions to revenue. If you can mentor them, what do you mentor about? Tell me how they get a hold of you.
They get a hold of me through I'm fine. Am I fine giving my email address? I don't know if that's appropriate.
Absolutely, you can.
So my email address is Josh, Josh, Bilow, BILOW @gmail.com. That's the best way. They can reach me on LinkedIn under Josh Bilow. I'm always available on LinkedIn, but I'm always available to help. If there's somebody out there that needs some help or just wants to figure out, what's next in their worlds, I'm there.
You got it. Josh, thank you so much. I wish you all the best of luck with your foundation. Thank you. I found this entire disruption in the buying process very enlightening. It's going to be very interesting to see how it shakes out.
I'm excited for it. And, if everything...
You're probably the only one excited for it.
I'm not excited for it. Listen, you just got to adjust, right? You got to adjust with it. If you don't adjust, you fail.
And we're going to end it on that note, because that is the best mic drop too. If you don't adjust, you fail. Thanks,
It's been
Josh.
my pleasure. This was awesome. It's great seeing you.
That's a wrap, everyone. If you learned something today or laughed at Josh or me, tell someone about this podcast and tell someone to go disrupt their markets with a tidbit from this show. Thank you for listening to Disruption Interruption, where we transform lives, change consumer behavior, alter economics, and never accept the status quo. Ciao for now. Because we live in a highly litigious society, with America being one of the top litigious countries in the world, here's our legal disclaimer. This information is not intended to be a substitute for professional public relations or legal advice. Do not disregard seeking professional, legal, healthcare, or financial advice, or delay seeking professional PR or legal advice because of something you have heard here. Contact an attorney to obtain advice on any particular legal situation or problem. Use of this podcast or our website or any of its social media or email links do not create an agency-client relationship between Johto PR and the user.